Last week was part 1 of our security breach model expose. We took a look at the 4 main animatronics and also their shattered counterparts. Today we're going to look at the rest of the models from security breach. But before we get into that, I gotta remind you of vertex, face, and edge. A vertices is the point at which triangles will meet, or these guys right here. An edge is the lines that make up a triangle, so one triangle would have 3 individual edges. And a face, otherwise known as a tri, is just simply what you can imagine it is, the actual face of the triangle. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started with Gregory. This model sits at 73,610 faces and 117,854 edges. Now because these models were made by steel wool, we get to see something that no FNAF game has ever really seen before, and that is human models. You could argue that Springtrap was the first example of it, but to be honest, it's pretty much mostly animatronic at that point. So let's take a look at Gregory. You can see his hair here is detailed pretty well. I mean, it doesn't use too many polys, but it still looks pretty solid. It's also aided by the almost not noticeable textures that are on his hair that illustrate different strands of it. But all the way around, it is a good model. Everything you'd expect to see in a human face is here. Obviously, the eyebrows, the lips, the nose are all well modeled by steel wool. He does have a textured bandage under his right eye, and I don't know if it's ever explicitly said why that band-aid is across his right cheek. In this model, something went wrong while importing the actual pupil textures, but I think you can use your imagination as you have in previous videos to fill it in yourself. Taking a look at his chest, you can see that the actual fold of his shirt is modeled separately from the rest of it. It kind of furls outwards as it gets closer to the neck of the actual shirt. And on his left pec, you can see the actual Fredbear logo right on his shirt there. On close inspection, you can see that it is actually pretty low res, but other than that, it is present. Moving to his hands, they're pretty uniform and pretty well modeled. Obviously nothing none of you guys have ever seen before unless you were born without hands, but it is a good model nonetheless. You can also see the Faz watch on his left wrist, and it's modeled very well for something that just sits on this model's wrist. The clasp, the band, and the main watch module itself are all very well detailed, and use quite a bit of polys for something that's so small on this model. The Faz watch also does have the Freddy ears and top hat, which make this model even better and use a lot of polys for such a small object, but it adds that extra touch. Taking a look at his shoes, they're not the best looking shoes in my opinion. Obviously they're modeled well and they look very smooth, but I think they're just ugly looking shoes. He's got what look to be knee-high socks as well that you could pull almost all the way up to the knee, where there is actually a bandage above his left kneecap. Taking a look at the back of the shoes as well, you could see a similar logo to what was on his shirt. However, this one is a fully colored version of Rockstar Freddy, where you can actually make out the details of his eyes, ears, mouth, and top hat. Next, we're going to move on to Vanessa, the second human model in this game. This model sits at a very close amount of polys to Gregory actually, 72,876 faces and 123,535 edges. So less faces but more edges than Gregory, which is strange. Again, the face model is very similar to Gregory's, however they do have a little bit more of a bulging eye model on this one. They also have her eyelashes modeled separately, but they utilize a texture plane instead of actual models of eyelashes, which probably saves a lot of space. The same goes with her hair, which is modeled very differently from how Gregory's was. Hers is definitely more stranded and individual-like, where Gregory's was just a hodgepodge clump of hairs. As we take a look at the back of her hair, we can see that she doesn't use a ponytail to actually tie her hair back, but instead just more of her hair. And I mean, screw it, it's not like she's going to a fashion show or anything. You don't have to worry about your looks too much, but I mean, it does kind of seem like that would cause knots if you were to take that out. She wears a security hat as well, which covers up a lot of her hair, so it's not like we get to see too much of the hair aside from the ponytail and whatever peeks out the sides. But moving on to her hands, she has much slimmer hands than Gregory, as women usually have than men, and her nails are painted. Her nails are sort of half model, half texture as well, where half of it is just a texture that goes on top and half of it is a model that extends her fingernails out a little bit further than her fingertips. She also holds a flashlight in the other hand, and if you look down the barrel of it, you'll see a bunch of static instead of an actual flashlight cover. Who's to say why this is? And it is a little strange, but I guess it gets the job done, right? Taking a look at her belt, you could see that she actually has a security badge fastened to the right side of her hips and a ginormous belt buckle that sits right in the middle. There's even a bit of outwards tucking of the shirt as it gets down to the belt line, which is kind of cool as well. And her shoes are nothing more than just some work boots, all black just like her pants, and do not offer much to look at honestly. So let's move on to Vany, which is Vanessa's evil counterpart. Vany's model sits at significantly less tries and edges, as we can see here, only sitting at 31,374 faces and 49,239 edges, significantly less than what we're used to. What's interesting about this costume is it's a full body mesh and does not offer any peek through the middle to see any of Vanessa inside. Taking a look at her head, she has bright beaming red eyes that are absolutely creepy as hell. Unlike Vanessa, she does have individually modeled eyelashes, 4 on each eye to be exact. And the whiskers extending out of her face are also fully modeled as well, and not just a texture on a flat plane. She does utilize textures on her actual body though, showing off a bunch of stitch work, different articles of cloth that were stitched together to make this costume. And taking a look at the ears, we can also see that there is a more pink cloth that actually is used for the ear holes, I guess. But unlike every other rabbit animatronic, we can't see any mechanical parts in this, as there probably is no mechanical parts in the ears. Just like Bonnie, she has a bow on her chest. However, instead of red, this bow is blue and is much different than the ones we usually see on Bonnie. This one seems to be made more of a ribbon type material, where the other one might be more of an actual sewed together cloth pillow sort of material. Who's to say? As we go down the arms to the hands, we can see that there is a different material being used for this hand, and is a very comically large Mickey Mouse-like hand. The fingers are very wide, however also somewhat flat. They're all seamed together at the tip of the glove, as you can see here by the stitches. And looking at the palm of her hand, she uses that same material that she did for the ears on the actual palm to mimic what a rabbit's paw might look like. She also has a cute little tail on the back. It's just a little cotton ball tail like a rabbit should have, and is not too heavy on polys, but it does still look pretty round and uniform. Taking a look at her feet, it's very similar to how William Afton would make his animatronics, with 3 big toes on each foot. As you can see, the color of the actual cloth is a bit different from left to right. The right seems to be a little bit lighter and fresher, while the left seems to be a little bit more brown. And up next we have the Sun and Moon daycare attendants. But first we're going to take a look at Sun, which consists of 98,381 faces and 166,215 edges. Now taking a look at his face, it is very creepy, consisting of half a moon and half a sun. The sun being illustrated by the simple polys that kind of extend outwards of the actual faceplate. He has a very big wide grin that doesn't actually use too many polys for the teeth, but the lips seem to use quite a bit of polys. If we take a look at the back, there's a lot more simplicity going on here, with an actual circuit board that would control the actual animatronic. You can see little screws as well holding the faceplate onto the actual backing, while the circuit board does most of the work. There's also a little extending arm that meets at the neck area, which has this cute little neck skirt around his actual collar. On the back too here as well, you can see a little hook that'll be used for a rope that we can take a look at when we look at the Moon daycare attendant, and again is a very simple model. His arms are very skinny, and right where the wrists meet the hands, you can see that they actually have ribbons tied around it with 2 little bells on each side. Taking a look at his hand as well, you can see the fingers are very long and slim. Very jester and creepy like, if you ask me. Taking a look at his pants, he also has that same little collar around his waist as he does his neck, and the pants widen as you go closer to the actual ankles of this model. On his feet, he has those curling shoes with a bell at each end of the shoe, and aside from the little star and moon on each one, they are pretty simplistic. Now we can move on to Moon, which will be a pretty quick one. This one has 103,527 faces and 174,858 edges. Now the main difference between this model and the other model are the colors that are used on this model, where this one is mostly predominantly blue, the hook on the back, which extends up pretty high but gets cut off after a certain point obviously, and the hat that the Moon daycare attendant wears. You could see it's sort of like a nightcap like you'd see in old fables or something like that, and has nice textured stars on it that leads to a very calming look honestly. If this animatronic's face wasn't so scary, I could actually see it ending up in a kid's storybook. Other than that, there's not too much else to look at with this animatronic, so let's move on to the staff bot. This model contains 36,478 faces and 56,776 edges. Now despite this model being very simplistic, it actually has more faces and edges than Vany's actual bunny costume, which is kind of strange. Taking a look at his head, he has nothing but a pair of eyes and decaled cheeks, as well as 2 little teardrops that kind of end up falling from his eyes. He has very simplistic arms, with a joint at each shoulder and elbow, which would definitely assist in helping the staff bot move. On each arm, he has a orange and blue wire heading from the mid-back to the tricep area of the staff bot, and we can see a little texture that says staff on the back. Not separately modeled, but just a little print that I assume would be painted on or printed onto the actual back of this model if this was real life. He does have one rotating joint as well, where the hips would be. And taking a look at his feet, there are actually no feet, and more or less a hoverboard for actual movement, sort of like something you'd see back in 2015. 2 wheels which I assume have a gyroscopic mechanism that keep this staff bot perfectly upright at all times. His hands only consist of 2 fingers and a thumb, and they are pretty long honestly, kind of reminiscent of the daycare attendants. And other than that, this model is pretty simple, so let's move on to another simple one, which is DJ Music Man. This model sits at 54,932 faces and 90,716 edges. Again, like the staff bot, there's not too much to look at with this model, but let's take a look regardless. Taking a look at DJ Music Man's face, it's very reminiscent to the original Music Man, however being color shifted in a few spots. The pinks are a little bit more vibrant, and the eyebrows and cheeks are now blue. His head is fully white this time, with no signs of any fun time purple, and his hat significantly got smaller. This time, it also has a green ribbon around the base of it instead of a normal white one. Another new feature is his headphones, the bright green earmuffs with the red handle connector that just make it kind of look a little bit childish, but since this is a child pizzeria, it makes perfect sense. His eyes are still black and soulless, so there's no love lost there. His teeth now, however, have the keys of a piano instead of just being fully brick-like, so that is an interesting touch. Taking a look at his body, he has these 6 yellow dots that I'm not too sure what the functions of are. Maybe steam ejectors, who knows. Another thing I'm unsure of is this black Xbox logo on the back here. You can see it's a giant black dome with 4 little bridges that don't connect in 4 separate X-shaped corners. If you know why he has these on his back, then let me know in the comments below. I'd like to hear it. Taking a look at his arms, they are very skinny and very simplistic, only containing these little joints at the spot where the leg meets the body and at the elbows. His hands, just like Vany's though, comically resemble Mickey Mouse's. However, this hand only has 3 fingers and a thumb instead of Vany's 4 fingers, which would fit a human hand. He has 6 of these hands in total, but the hand and arm models are exactly the same, so it was probably very easy for them to just copy and paste each of these into position. And up next we have the little DJ Music Man. This is the smallest model of the game, sitting at 37,269 faces and 70,378 edges. This model very closely resembles the Music Man model from my part 2 of FNAF 6's model expose, so I'm not going to cover this for too long since I did cover that already previously, but there is quite a bit of wear and tear on this one. All the colors seem to remain very similar, if not the exact same to the actual Music Man models, however being dulled by the dust and debris that this guy's covered in. His cymbals have sustained some damage as well as his hands, and I'm not sure how well this Music Man would work anymore, but it does look significantly more creepy, if that's even possible, than the original Music Man model. Maybe simply because of the deterioration, but definitely because of those soulless eyes. His legs as well also remain very spider-like, however differ a lot from the big Music Man that we just took a look at, having little suction cups at the bottom instead of actual feet. And for our final 2, we have the most interesting animatronics of this video, that being Burntrap and the Blob. But first we're gonna go with Burntrap, who sits at 150,343 faces and 272,672 edges. Now this is a fantastic Springtrap model and way better than Scraptrap. I believe the community refers to this one as Burntrap, but I might slip up, so forgive me if I do. We can see, taking a look at Springtrap here, that his jaw is fully exposed, showing the actual corpsing effect of Springtrap in full effect, as well as this portion of his skull being fully exposed as well. You can see that the skin is rotted to the core on Afton already. If we take a peek under his animatronic nose, we can see his real nose has fully been decomposed as well, only having the nostrils of what looked to be a goblin from Fallout. However, his teeth remain pretty well intact. I mean, I don't even think he's lost one. Taking a look at his back, he seems to use these metal bridging parts and actual rivets to hold his animatronic shell together still. And we can also see that there is this big metal spine that holds him up, because it doesn't look like there's any more actual spine to hold him up by. As we take a look at his torso, we can see a bunch of different mechanisms and hoses that are still connected to Afton. These 2 in particular look like they're latched on to his remaining skin, and overall he remains pretty stringy in this area, not having a lot of actual flesh here. His arms as well have been almost fully consumed by the animatronic endo. However, there is a little bit more on his actual hands. You can see there's still a little bit of stringy remaining burned on skin, with very sharp tips to his fingers. This model of Springtrap also has a first, containing both an endo foot and an actual animatronic foot. The original Springtrap didn't have either of his feet, and Scraptrap had both of his feet, so this is the first time we're really seeing this in the game. Just like Scraptrap, there is a little bit of remaining flesh over his foot, but this time it's over his animatronic foot instead of the actual costume foot, which makes a little bit more sense if I'm being honest. And finally, we're gonna move on to the Blob. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull the actual model from the game since it only really comes from a cutscene, so I had to pull from a fan model that was just based off accuracy. But this fan model consists of 186,610 faces and 317,828 edges. The textures might be a little bit off, but it is what it is. As we take a look at the main head of the Blob, it is Funtime Freddy. however sustaining a ton of burn damage, almost unrecognizable from the original aside from the shape alone. It barely retains any of the pink or white that it was meant to have originally, and its eyes have fully blackened except for the white pupils in the center. The blob also contains Bonnie's old head, Chica's whole torso and head, the puppet's mask, Baby's whole head, and Funtime Foxy's head. Chica's has probably seen the least amount of burning, not having too much damage on her, however still remaining very burned. Bonnie's head is almost fully black, meaning that this one was probably a pretty bad victim of the fire. Baby's is also wiped almost entirely of color aside from a few spots here and there, and same goes for Funtime Foxy. Foxy, only retaining a tiny bit of the color that she or he once had. There's also this funny little torso with a actual hand for a head. It kind of looks like one of the older Endos with a Funtime Foxy hand, but maybe I'm incorrect. There's also a ton of other animatronic hands in here, like Baby's, Bonnie's, and a bunch of other ones. Every other animatronic seems to have burned into a giant heap and manages to combine all of these souls together to create one massive blob. Pretty terrifying if you ask me. Other than that, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and maybe a comment as well. Subscribe if you want to see more of these FNAF ones, because we got Ruin coming up next week. And check out my Instagram as well if you're interested in seeing what I'm up to. Also, check out the new shirts in my shop. We got a few new designs uploaded, so if you want to take a look, there's a link in the description. You can get them as shirts, stickers, and a bunch of other stuff. So check it out. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.